Next up is Judge Lamothe. He's one of our associate justices in the district court here in Lynn. Also a Lynn resident, committed to the community. I do have to say, when I was hired as a probation officer, I worked in the drug court for a couple of years with Jen Jenkins is here, and I was transferred out. And Judge Lamothe is now our drug court judge, who's in Lynn every day. And I do have to say, I just told the judge, he has brought the drug court in Lynn to a whole new level of participation, weekly briefing meetings. They have a referral and a interview process. They just received a grant. I don't want to tell too much about what the judge is going to speak to, but hiring a full-time drug court coordinator. It's just a program where we utilize. If someone that I have on my caseload is a probation officer who's using heroin, and they're not reoffending or doing anything other major crimes, I think a drug court referral with the intense supervision by the two POs, PO Ward and PO Montgomery, is a excellent resource. And with no further ado, Judge James Lamothe in the Lynn Drug Court.
Thank you. I very much appreciate the chance to talk to everybody here. And many of you, we know each other. We all are working on the same issue together, and we come to it, I think, from looking at it from different aspects, but we all have the same goals in mind. And I really appreciate everybody just being together here. As most of you know, drug court is an intensely supervised probation using a team approach. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that works and where I think that's going. But Chief Carpenter read to you some statistics from the Lynn police about the overdoses. And fortunately, the police will share that with us, and I get those reports, and I got a year-end report that showed, every overdose that happened in the city. And the day I got the report happened to be one of the drug court days. And one of my drug court participants was standing in front of me. And he was about to engage in a new level of care, and I was trying to impress upon him, the seriousness of this and how hard he had to work at this to make it work. So I said, I looked at the report of the overdoses in the city for this past year, and I saw your name on there twice. I said, you overdosed twice before you came into drug court. He said, Judge, honestly, it was really more like 5 times. Okay, so what that says to me, the chief has 280 reported overdoses in the city. There are a lot more than that happening. Okay, this guy was on the list for 2, but he had overdosed 5 times that he was willing to admit to me. So it's everywhere. It's a public health issue. It's not just a law enforcement issue or a court issue. It's a public health issue. So what we do in the courts is really just a small piece of it. Where the solution really has to come is in the homes and in the medical settings, in the treatment end of things. That's really where it's great, and I'm so happy and encouraged by what especially the Lynn police, but law enforcement everywhere is starting to do in terms of getting proactive on this issue and the referrals that they're making to the treatment providers and things like that. That's wonderful. And I think what it's going to take is for all of us to work together on that, and from each of our little pieces of it, and if we work together, it's going to help things, help improve the situation, I think, to some extent. Drug courts in general began nationally in the 1990s. They've been around a long time. This idea of drug court was started in Miami, Florida in the early 90s. And the Lynn Drug Court itself has been around since 1999. Many of you know that, but some of you don't. 1999 was the first Lynn Drug Court, started by a guy named Bob Zimian. But drug courts were sort of, they weren't the mainstream, and people didn't really appreciate that they could do any good, or why were courts getting involved in this kind of a thing for a long time, until after a while, some of the research started to show that drug courts were very effective in reducing recidivism. And there's an outfit now called the National Drug Court Institute which has collected a number of studies, and most of them are academic studies, but studies from across the country, which show that the drug court approach is the single most effective way that we have in the judicial system to reduce recidivism. By recidivism, we mean repeat offenses, repeat criminal offenses. So we're just talking about this little piece of the pie here with substance abuse that involves people involved in the criminal justice system. There's a whole bunch of people that are drug addicts that are in bad trouble that don't end up in the criminal justice system. But the best way that we can reduce recidivism, which I think everybody wants that's involved in the court system, is this drug court approach that we do. How does it work? As I said, it's an intensely supervised probation. So when somebody, and it's not just a possession of a drug that will get you into drug court. As most of the law enforcement people here know, when you are addicted to, especially heroin, but any kind of substance abuse, you end up committing crimes like property crimes, shoplifting, breaking and entering, breaking into vehicles. There's prostitution, things like that. So people come to drug court having committed all these kinds of crimes, operating under, obviously the driving offenses. And they come to drug court on probation. So they've admitted to a crime, and many times they've violated that probation more than once before they become a drug court participant. What we do is, as a team, and this team involves probation, it involves treatment providers, it involves a prosecutor, defense lawyers, and the judge, is we try to develop a treatment plan and a success plan for this person to get into recovery and stay there. And one of the reasons that it works so well is because we, as a team, each of us learns, and I learned from scratch on this stuff. And I've been doing drug courts now for about 7 years. I started in the Chelsea drug court, and I've been in the Lynn drug court now for 4 years. You learn a lot about substance abuse and the treatment of it and what works and what doesn't. And we've been to trainings. We go to national and state trainings on these subjects, so that if you have a client or a person that's involved in the criminal justice system that just has a substance abuse issue that it seems unfixable, the drug court approach would be the best approach in terms of trying to help that person to recover and stay sober, because we have a little bit more expertise in the subject matter and because we work as a team. The Lynn police have been very cooperative with us in terms of trying to approach and solve these problems. And we have a detective from the drug task force who regularly attends our drug court meetings and has gone to some of these trainings himself, Mike DeMiglio, who's done wonders for us, and also provides eyes and ears on the street for us. And it's not in terms of trying to catch somebody when they do bad as much as it is to steer people away from trouble. And that helps in the community. It helps a drug addict to know, to be able to say to his friend when offered something, geez, I don't know, my PO's coming around the corner, or, they know me, I'm a drug court guy, So it just, it helps to steer people away from bad situations. And it also just helps us to understand the problem better and where the problem areas are and who we need to go after to try to help. Why does drug court work? When I first became a judge, I had honestly no intention of ever becoming involved with anything like drug court. I didn't even know about it. I had no idea what it would be. I consider myself sort of a law and order guy. And I still do. But what I found was that when, I'd be putting people on probation and saying, stay drug and alcohol free. That was a condition of their probation. Guilty, a year probation, drug and alcohol free, random screens. Every single one of those people, if there were a heroin addict that I put on probation, every single one of them, I'm not talking about 99%, every single one of them violated their probation. Because you can't just tell a heroin addict, stay off heroin and let them go their merry way. They're not going to stop. It's impossible for that to work. It's just impossible. So, okay, well, now the next thing is, well, we'll say, okay, drug and alcohol free, random screens, treatment deemed necessary, right? So the probation officer sends this person to an evaluation. And the person goes to the evaluation and says, I don't really have much of a problem. I got caught this one time. It was my friends. I'm okay. I'm fine. So the evaluation comes back. This person doesn't need any real treatment. They don't get any. Guess what? They violate. Of course they do. Because they're a heroin addict. What drug court does is it provides a structure. It provides an accountability. Someone is watching them. So that when we screen somebody and we find that they're appropriate for drug court, we decide as a team what sort of treatment they need, what level of care, where they might be placed, and they then report to the judge, at first on a weekly basis and over time less often. But they report and they say, and they have to come up with a report from their program. How are you doing? Are you testing clean? And they have to face the judge every week. And after a while, they get to learn that the judge knows their case, knows about them, cares what's going to happen to them. And this might be the first time in their life that anybody in a position of authority really cared what happened to them or gave them a compliment if they did well. And that can be very meaningful to somebody who's on probation, who's a substance abuser. And that's why, and it doesn't matter if it's me or some other person, whoever's wearing that black robe. And that's why drug courts in general as a concept work for people. So we've had a lot of successes. We've had a lot of people who have not succeeded. We have people who are clean and sober for a year or 2 years and they relapse. But they were clean and sober for 2 years or a year, right? I read something recently about how we have this sort of different way of looking at a heroin addict than we do about other sorts of addictions. For instance, a cigarette smoker. Cigarette smoker tries to quit. I myself, I quit smoking 10 times. I was really good at quitting smoking, right? I'd quit. I'd go 6 months or sometimes almost a year. I'd have one. Pretty soon it'd be like 10 a day, and then it'd be like a pack a day, and geez, I got to quit again. Nobody ever wrote me off and said, oh, this guy's never going to get it, right? They kept saying, my wife would keep saying, you got to quit, you got to quit. Until one day, 5 years, August 2nd, 2009 was the last cigarette I ever smoked. Okay? What I'm trying to say is, why do we treat drug addiction differently? Somebody relapses doesn't mean we don't try to get them to stop again. So in drug court, we give people chance, and we give them chance and chance and chance and chances again. Now, there are always consequences for behaviors. So a lot of times they might have to serve a period of time in jail as a consequence for a behavior, but we don't give up. We keep trying. And I'll tell you that personally for me, having done this for now 7 years or so, it's the most rewarding part of my job. It's really moving to encounter someone who has gone through the drug court program and has really turned their life around. And this happens to me quite often. I live in Lynn, I'm around Lynn, so I'll see somebody on the street. I was at the sub shop. I saw this guy, he's, hey, Judge, how are you? Looked me in the eye, shook my hand, and I said, how you doing? I'm doing great. I got a great job, got a new car. He wants to show me his new car, right? It's just so heartwarming to see that because this guy, when I first met him, was a mess. And the life has completely changed. I would encourage any of you who have never been to a drug court graduation to come to a graduation. Once a year, we have a ceremony where everybody who's completed the drug court program within that year will get presented with a certificate of graduation saying they've completed drug court. And many times, their family members will come. People who they haven't necessarily even spoken to in years. Because what drug abuse can do, as we all know, it can tear apart a family, right? When someone's abusing heroin especially, those family relationships are just torn apart. They lie, they cheat, they steal from their own family members, right? They lose custody of their children, right? So, but over time, and this is something that we have to convince people something, it can change. Your life didn't end. If you can get clean, if you can stay clean, these relationships can be repaired. So if you come to a graduation, you'll see, and mothers and fathers hugging their children, proud of what they've done, that they're now clean and sober, families coming together, being, especially the women sometimes in the drug court, being reunited with the children that they lost custody of, that they now have a chance of getting custody of again. And I promise you, if you come to a drug court graduation, you will not leave the same person as when you started. It's just, it can be really, really moving. I don't want to take a lot of time. I don't have a slideshow. I'm so happy that this is happening. What I hope, I think, comes out of this thing today that we're doing today is that really, we make some connections. I think everybody will learn something they didn't know because we have so many different people speaking from all aspects of this problem. But what really matters is what we do after we leave here, and so I'm encouraging people to make connections with one another, okay? We need, more than anything else, access to treatment beds. And I think you've heard that story over and over again, and that's what I want our legislators to understand, and people who are able to start that. One thing I did get an email yesterday about, and I think Sheriff Cousins mentioned this, there is an effort underway, and I think there was a major step forward in that process yesterday or the day before when an agreement was made to reserve treatment beds for the drug courts. When I said that all these studies started to show the effectiveness of the drug courts, one of the results of that has been this new momentum in favor of expanding the reach of drug courts. And I think, I know the stated goal of our current Chief Justice is that we make drug courts available to everyone in the Commonwealth. Right now, there are pockets where there are drug courts. Lynn has had a drug court, as I said, for 15 years. There are some places that don't have them. And so they're expanding, and we're creating new drug courts in other locations so that everybody in Massachusetts will have access to that if they want it. And I think that's really encouraging. But also this new effort that's being made to connect with the treatment providers is a huge step forward. But that's something that we need. I think connections between law enforcement, the court system, the treatment providers, the families, those are the things that are going to matter. So I hope that everyone, before they leave today, makes a connection with somebody they didn't know before and carries that forward. And hopefully we're going to work toward a solution.
Thank you, Judge Lamothe. A judge that understands what we go through and a judge that gets it every day. I just want to show one thing real quick. This is with something I went through with my family member recently, and like Judge Lamothe touched on, and everyone that's presented tonight today spoke about. You could spend your whole day getting a bed for somebody in detox, and as the judge and the sheriff and everybody that spoke talked about, finding a bed is next to impossible. We need more beds, but this is a day that we found a bed. We found a bed for someone in my family over in Danvers Detox, and Harvard Pilgrim Health Insurance. The governor's not here, right? He used to run the program. Denied him a bed. I put this on a slide last night. The insurance company will not approve an inpatient detox. They are literally at the building out front of Danvers Detox, but recommends an outpatient. And we were on the phone with this company, and they said, you can go to a program, but you can't go to a detox. And we'll segue into the treatment panel here. You can go to a program, but you can't go to a detox. I said, name me a program you can go if you're positive for heroin. They said Hampstead. Has anyone heard of Hampstead? Oh, you have? Okay. I go, where the heck is Hampstead? Hampstead, New Hampshire. You can go up there. An active heroin user can go to Hampstead, New Hampshire. But I just wanted to show you this. You spend your day getting someone a bed, and if they have insurance, this is what happens. Beds are denied. With that said, Jayne Wilson is here today from the Bureau of Substance Abuse Services, Department of Public Health. This is the section where Mr. Akers is going to have some microphones. We're going to have some questions at the end. We're going to try to wrap up a little bit early, but Jayne?
I'm really glad to be part of this important event. It's nice to see everybody coming together to work together to hopefully get a handle on this disease that's claiming so many lives. And as I was driving over here, I was thinking about a time when I was in a task force, in Lynn. It was in the late 90s, I think. It was called the Stop Heroin Overdose Task Force. And at those meetings, there were maybe 6, 10 of us that sat around a table. And to look out and see all of you here today, I'm just blown away by your interest in addressing the epidemic. Talking a little bit about how the Bureau of Substance Abuse Services addresses substance use disorders, we use a 4-part approach, and we use prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery support services. I will be talking more about treatment later in greater detail, but when you think about prevention, that starts as early as middle school, and research shows that the longer someone can delay their first use of alcohol or a substance, it significantly decreases their chance of developing a substance use disorder. So for someone who starts using alcohol or a substance at age 14, they've got a 47% chance of developing a substance use disorder. If someone begins at age 21, that drops down to 9%. So that's really important. Another thing I just want to point out, and I'm not doing justice to our prevention department, but there are some cards in the back on the Project COPE table, and one is the number for our helpline. So if you know somebody who has a substance use disorder, you're working with someone, you can call that number and people will help you and them to get help. So that's prevention. The second method is through intervention. And the goal of intervention is to intervene before a substance use disorder fully develops. And we do this by educating healthcare providers so that they ask the right questions about substance use so they can help people make a connection between their substance abuse and negative outcomes. And in some of those cases, it gives the individual an opportunity to assess what they're doing and how it impacted them and maybe change that behavior. And then we also have recovery support services because we're finding that there's been a paradigm shift away from acute and episodic care to care across the lifetime. So when someone finishes traditional treatment, they still need support. Okay, now to focus on our treatment system. When thinking about the treatment system, it's important to remember a couple of things, and I think a few others have touched on this. The first is that addiction is a chronic, progressive disease. One of its hallmarks is relapse. And when you think about other medical illnesses such as asthma, diabetes, hypertension, those folks also relapse too, but what they call it in the medical community is an exacerbation of their symptoms. And if you compare substance use disorders to those other illnesses that I mentioned, there's the same rate of treatment compliance and following recommendations across the board. The other point I want to make is that substance use disorders can't be cured. It would be great if they could, but they can't. But the good news is they can be managed effectively across one's lifetime. And then finally, to be effective, treatment needs to deal with the multiple needs of the individual, not just their substance use. So in thinking about individual treatment, there's many doors to beginning a recovery process, and no one way is right for everybody. So what treatment is available? Most folks usually think of our acute treatment services, which are detox. Inpatient detox, individual goes in for several days. They're usually weaned off the opioids using methadone or buprenorphine, more commonly known as Suboxone, and they complete. From that, they can step down to other levels of care that are secure and can help them move forward with their recovery process. I've been hearing throughout the day, beds, beds, beds. I don't disagree. I think that what a lot of people don't realize is that individuals can detox on an outpatient basis, and sometimes it's easier and quicker to get them into a program like that. Our OTPs, which are methadone, Suboxone programs, they do detoxes. OTPs offer a 30-day detox and a 6-month detox, where a person can detox. They have to go in every day. They get supportive services. They get drug testing, but that's an option. And also, buprenorphine programs can also detoxify patients. So regardless of the type of detox that someone has, they need to continue treatment beyond that. So what are some of the treatments we have? I think about residential services in our recovery homes, what people often refer to as halfway house. This is a safe environment that's structured, where people get a lot of support. They work on getting reintegrated into the community, and involved in 12-step meetings, self-help meetings. And we've got a lot of different types of those programs. We've got them for families, we've got them for moms and their kids, and then within that we've got different models. So another way that people can continue to get help is through outpatient services. I mentioned earlier methadone and buprenorphine in terms of a detox, but they can also be used very effectively for maintenance to keep people from relapsing to opioid use. There was a recent article in the New England Journal of Medicine, I think it was last spring, and they looked at the role of methadone and buprenorphine in tackling fatal opioid overdoses. And the article described a study in Baltimore between the years of 1995 and 2009. And they found that as methadone and buprenorphine treatment services became more available, the number of fatal overdoses decreased by 50%. That's pretty significant. So methadone, as I mentioned earlier, is available in our OTPs. And this is a medically monitored service for clients. And they get medical and pharmacological interventions. They also get counseling, vocational help. And I know Ed's going to talk about that a little bit more later. We also have office-based opioid treatment, which we call OBOTs. And these are seated in federally qualified health centers, and there's one right here in Lynn. And the thinking with that is a lot of times the patients who might need this treatment might be going for medical care, but there's no treatment that they can get under that roof. So they can go to the OBOT, get their medical care, get started on Suboxone and be followed there. Other outpatient services include counseling, and this is for individuals and families, help them build recovery skills so that they can maintain a substance-free lifestyle. And then we also have day treatment programs. People might think of them as intensive outpatient, where a person can go for up to 4 days a week and get several hours of counseling each day. The system that I described, we have a similar system for adolescents. We have our version of detox for adolescents is youth stabilization, and we also have recovery homes for adolescents. Additionally, we have recovery high schools. It's sort of hard if you're a kid and you're grappling with a substance use disorder and all your friends are using. This is a place where they can go to school, get their education, and learn, the skills they need to remain clean. So, in closing, I just want to remind people about the helpline as a resource, and also our prevention department has materials that are available to people. There's no charge, and again, the cards are on the Project COPE table. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary. I work for Health Innovation. Mary Wheeler. My name is. I work for Health Innovations, which is a really small agency, and I run a branch of their agency called Healthy Streets Outreach Program, which has been operating in Lynn since the very early 90s to counteract the heroin addiction problems that were going on then, as well as the growing cases of HIV, AIDS, and overdose. So it's well established. It's been around for a while. I wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of street-based services as part of the continuum to keep people involved in care, whether they go back to using or not. So street-based services serve populations that are in chaotic use all the way up to long-term abstinence by providing a multitude of services. For someone who's in long-term abstinence, they may help seal quarries to help people get jobs. Somebody along the lines of using chaotically, they may help them access detox, help them with naloxone rescue kits, which is one of the things that we do offer here in Lynn, and I've been involved in that process in Massachusetts since 2003, and it really has been an amazing amazing program. So one of the wonderful things about street-based services is we usually have a really good ear to the street. We know what's going on. A lot of times we have a lot of information before other people do about overdose, about drug use, about new trends. People are very likely to come to us for treatment. Sometimes places will offer transportation to detox. I'm going to talk about the reality of accessing all those wonderful programs that Jayne talked about. So last year we counted at the drop-in center, and it doesn't count over the phone or off-site. We put 106 people into detox beds. Now, somebody comes in, they say, I want a detox. Okay, so we start the process. We have to think about things like, what are they detoxing from? Do they have insurance? Do they have Mass Health? What kind of Mass Health plan do they have? Because that does make a difference depending on the detox. Are they a polydrug user? Are they detoxing from both heroin and benzos? What's the quantity of benzos? Do they need a hospital level of care? Are they dual diagnosis? Most likely, right? So now the client says, I'm going to go and get a pack of cigarettes, right? A lot can change in that 5 minutes. When I walked to the store, somebody said, oh, you know, they might not want to go tomorrow. They might not want to go 5 minutes after they ask you. Got to give them a list, give them the information. I'm here for you tomorrow. Never give up on them, like the judge said, which is really, really important. One of the other problems with detox is some places require you to have a photo ID, and they will not accept a printout from the police department with your picture and your record, which we rely on a lot, by the way, to get people into treatment. So, or your Middleton ID bracelet. Sometimes that won't get you in the door, even though it has your photograph on it. So now we need to get this person an ID. They have no income. They lost their birth certificate and their social security card because they're homeless and their stuff got stolen. So how are we going to get those two things? Because we don't have the money to pay for that, and they don't have a home or an address or the documentation to be able to get those things. So now we can't get them a bed and treatment because they have no picture ID and no way to get that. So where do we go from there, right? Emergency room is probably our best bet, which is really good for some cases, but overall we try and discourage overuse of the emergency room. It's not what it's there for. I understand substance use can be an emergency. There are a lot of other places that can access detox beds for your patients, street outreach programs, urgent care, community health centers, street nurses, like Kelly Holland works with Gargi Cooper, she's here. There's a lot of other places, right? CSS and TSS, clinical stabilization and transitional support services. The majority of those beds are for men. The number of treatment beds for women in Massachusetts is incredibly low, right? The other problem is we have a lot of dry shelters. So for people who are unable to discontinue their drug and alcohol use, if they can't get into a treatment bed that day, they also can't get into the shelter for the night. So we run into the problem of having no roof over their head. CSS and TSS are post-detox. About 90% of those programs, you have to come from a detox. So somebody comes into our office, says, hey Mary, I just got out of jail, I've been in for 6 months. I don't want to get high, I need a bed and treatment. What does that mean? Can I do that? Yeah, absolutely. We do it all the time. Sometimes we do it while they're still locked up. I need their psychosocial, which means I need a licensed clinician to fill out this paperwork, which means I need an appointment with a licensed clinician, right? Or I can get their last psychosocial from the jail or the last program they went to. I requested paperwork for somebody who got out of prison from a certain hospital. It took them 2 weeks to get me his paperwork. Needless to say, he was off and running because he's not going to wait 2 weeks for me to get a faxed psychosocial. The other problem is, are they going to take this person from the street? And how are they going to get there? Halfway house. Most halfway houses, you need to come from one of these CSS or TSS programs, right? What kind of medication is the person on? What if they are on psych medications that are really working? This is the first time somebody's put down the drug and picked up something for their mental health and it's worked, they're not using, they feel good, but this halfway house won't let you in on those meds, right? Sober housing. I'm sure we've all had a struggle with sober housing, right? Some are amazing. Some are not so amazing. We call them not so sober houses. They can be really expensive. You do need an income. A lot of places require a first week, last week payment to move in. That can be a couple $100s, right? Methadone and Suboxone clinics. Suboxone, huge waiting lists. Methadone clinic, you need a picture ID. They will work with you though. Again, we come back to the ID situation. Vivitrol clinics. Vivitrol is a 30-day blocker, which is a wonderful medication. Kenney is here, actually. She does that. Some places it's really hard to get an appointment. Some places you can't find people that will take you. You can do a primary care physician. However, that individual needs 7 to 12 days of clean urine screens. I'm shooting heroin, I'd really, really like to stop. Okay, can you just stop while you're living outside for 7 to 10 days? And I'm gonna give you this naltrexone pill that you're responsible for taking every day? Okay, so that's another barrier for Vivitrol. There's been days where I've spent 8 hours at the drop-in center calling for detox beds, and then had to drive the patient an hour and a half away from Lynn in order to get them into a detox bed because they had no way to get there and I wasn't about to leave them stranded. So the reality of accessing these places, if there is a bed available, is really, really hard. So when you think about sending people out on probation and say, okay, you have to be in a residential program by tomorrow or you're going to jail, that really is almost impossible, right? But what you can do to make sure you don't lose them is say, hey, if you start getting high, obviously we're gonna, have to put you away for a while. But in the interim, get some LynnCAM. Go to your local drop-in center. Are you living with your mother and father? Tell your mother and father they should have some LynnCAM on hand to make sure that you're okay, to make sure that you don't die. As you're releasing people off of their probation, their parole, onto the bracelet out of drug court, it's important to remember that they are always at risk for relapse for the rest of their life, right? It's okay to say to somebody, hey, if you start getting high down the line, come back and see me, or go to your local outreach center, ask them for some help if you're not comfortable with me. I think that's it. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, Mary, thank you. My name is Wendy Kent. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health and Prevention Programs at Project COPE, which as of January 14th became an affiliate of Bridgewell. I am going to talk a little bit about the continuum of care and why it is so important. And there's a few points that I had intended to make, and I'm actually going to make them even though they have been stated already because I think they bear repeating. One is just a constant reminder that addiction is a chronic disease that is characterized by relapse and that requires long-term care. The other important point, and I believe Judge Lamothe mentioned this, is that this population is not just dealing with addiction. We are dealing with a myriad of issues. We're dealing with mental health problems. We are dealing with homelessness. We are dealing with legal issues. We are dealing with medical issues. The list goes on and on. So this is why long-term and comprehensive and coordinated care is so important. And as difficult as it is to acquire it, once you do acquire it, we have to maintain their involvement on a long-term basis. Treatment has to be geared towards the individual as they move through different stages in the recovery process. We really have to look at treatment not just as this thing, but rather as a set of services that people are going to be receiving on an ongoing basis. It is not uncommon that we see people start out in outpatient treatment and they're just not able to sustain their recovery. They don't have the coping skills or community supports available, and they might go into detox for a few days and then they come out and they try outpatient again and it doesn't work. A few days of stabilization is insufficient. So then we really have to reevaluate what are their long-term needs, what level of care that they need in order to sustain their recovery. And even once they do go into treatment, even when they do get into a residential program, when they come out of that inpatient program, it doesn't end there. We have to continue to work with them. They need long-term outpatient therapy. Many of them need medicated assisted therapy. Many of them need other services in order to keep them on track with their recovery. And in many cases, you know, Mary made reference to sober housing. That's an important component of the treatment continuum of when people leave residential treatment, getting into a sober housing environment. Going back and reintegrating into the community cold is a setup for relapse, and it is just too big of a leap for them. So you can see how this really requires a very long-term investment of time and resources. When you think about what somebody in recovery has to contend with, they are dealing with having to learn the skills necessary to not respond to their cravings, learning how to avoid relapse, learning how to change everything that they do, their behavior, their outlook. It's a tall order. Treatment also has to involve a lot of education on drugs and alcohol. There's an assumption often that people that use drugs know a lot about them, and they don't. They don't know about the addiction process. They don't know about really what happens once that drug enters their system. And through this process, there has to be a lot of education about the risk of relapse and the potential consequences, particularly overdose. And that's just what's involved in dealing with their addiction. So you compound that with someone who is learning to deal with a chronic history of anxiety or depression or trauma without the use of alcohol and other drugs, and getting them, you know, the mental health care that they need. You're dealing with people that are struggling to find a place to live. You're dealing with individuals who have a long history of legal involvement. Yeah, I could go on and on. I won't, I promise. But you can see how huge the process is, and it explains a lot why relapse is such a big piece of the recovery process. Statistically, the majority of people who complete treatment will relapse within the year after completing. 80% of them will relapse within 90 days of completion. 50% of those who complete treatment will relapse within 30 days. And of individuals who are connected with AA and NA support without other aftercare components, at least 50% will stop going to meetings within 90 days. So again, it emphasizes that we have to continue to address this on a very large scale, and we really have to work together as a team on this. These statistics do sound somewhat grim, but it is the reality of the disease. There was, and I'll just mention this, Don didn't mention this, but there was an original plan to have an individual speak today who was in recovery. He is struggling right now and was not able to do this. Again, it's the reality of what we were dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Research has shown that the longer the time of engagement of someone in treatment, the greater chances they will be successful. It's been shown time and time again. And treatment outcomes, positive treatment outcomes are enhanced when the continuum of care includes a focus on all the other issues that the individual is dealing with. We see this all the time in treatment. So a couple of points that I just wanted to add, and these have been touched on, but again, I think they're extremely important, is just a reminder to never forget that relapse is a part of the recovery process in addiction. It's always going to be there. And regardless of the capacity in which you are dealing with someone who is in recovery, it's important to remember that we always have to be in treatment working with them on relapse. We have to prepare them for relapse so that they don't run away, because that often happens. Relapse should not be considered as a failure. It is the nature of the beast. It is what we have to be realistic about. And as providers or anybody dealing with this, we have to be prepared for relapse as well. Because no matter how many years you've been in this business, and I've been doing this for 35 years. I started as a toddler. There's still cases that get to me. There's still surprises. There are people that surprise us in their recovery. There's people that surprise us when they relapse. It still breaks your heart, no matter how long you've been dealing with it. It is extremely important in treatment, or anybody that is dealing with somebody in recovery, particularly people that are recovering from opiate addiction, to continuously be educating them about overdose risk recognition and response. We can't just tell them about them once. It has to be incorporated into all treatment. Anybody that's working with this population has to include this piece. And the other thing is that we do not have to be in this alone. The benefit of this, and it's really fabulous to see the number of people who have come here today representing so many sectors, and this has been mentioned before, but it's been great for me to see this. There is a wealth of resources in this community to address addiction, and within your packets there are multiple resource directories. I encourage people to use those, make note of those numbers, use those numbers. If you have a question, if you have a probationer that is just struggling and you're just not sure what to do, pick up the phone, call a provider, call Mary's program. I mean, there's so many options available. We have to work on this collectively and collaboratively. Thank you.
Donna Kausek from Eliot Community Human Services. We are a local mental health community resource. We have many, many services. We have outpatient, we have crisis evaluations that are offered 24/7. We have psychopharm appointments. We have a lot of business. In just our emergency services program alone, we see around 700 people a month. These are people in either a psychiatric or a substance abuse crisis who come to us looking for services. We noticed a few years ago, 2 years ago, that our substance abuse percentage number was rising. We were at about 13%, we went up to 15%, and now 20% of the people coming to us for services are substance abusers looking for help. We have been lucky enough to partner, as Chief Coppinger took a little of my thunder of my talk today, to partner with the Lynn Police, where we have embedded from Eliot a clinician and a case manager. Their whole goal is to help people get services. We have a clinician who drives around with the Lynn Police to offer referrals, information, psychoeducation, help families. As you've heard this morning, it's not just the addict who is suffering, it's the whole family. We would like to be able to offer somewhat of a life preserver. You've heard a lot of grim information this morning. And I think what we can offer to both the addict and to their families is a little bit of hope. We are open, much to my chagrin, quite frankly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, a lot of time there. And people can come in and say, for the first time, today's the day, I want to get clean. We'll say, great, here's a phone, here's the phone numbers. We're around. Do you want a cup of coffee while you're making those calls? Let us help you. And we may turn around and they may have left. That after thinking about it, today wasn't the day. But our hope is, because we were respectful to them, because we gave them a little warmth and a little kindness, they're going to come back to us another day. We don't care if people come to us once or come to us 25 times. We will offer them the respect and the dignity that we would any other person coming in. I think what's important for us to remember as providers, I mean, Wendy, I've been around 35 years, started as a toddler as well, that it's just so great to see so many people here working together, because this isn't a problem that our agency can fix. I don't think it's a problem that the police or the legal system can fix, but I think if we all work together and chip away at it and offer, when someone puts a hand out, that we will give them a life preserver, and we will try in every way that we can, even if it's just to give them a cup of coffee, give them a candy bar. We're going to help you.
Hi, I'm Ed DeMarquez. I'm the clinic director for Habit Management, AKA Habit OPCO, and in the past year, AKA CRC Health Group. Been through a lot of transitions over the years. First and foremost, I want to thank all of the speakers from earlier and those that are joining me here up at the panel, and all of you that are in this room. I work in medication-assisted treatment. I've been doing this work for 22 years. I started with Habit back when the Boston program was in Kenmore Square. I started as a clinician, moved on to a program director position, moved on to a director of operations position, and am now back as clinic director in the program here in Lynn. I'm well aware of the fact that the type of treatment that we provide is controversial. I'm well aware of the fact that I've done panels, I've visited programs, spoke to groups on a number of occasions about the type of treatment that we provide. And that what I've come to know from all of it is we're in the business of saving lives, and that's the bottom line. You know, IOPs work for some, inpatient treatment works for some, mental health therapy works for some, AA works for some, NA works for some, and medication-assisted treatment works for some as well. You know, there is for those of you that may be interested, that don't know much about medication-assisted treatment or would like to know more about medication-assisted treatment, there is a website, www.atforum.com. It has the most current and up-to-date information on everything related to medication-assisted treatment to treatment for opioid addiction. From resources across the country, from research articles that have been done over the years. My understanding is that methadone is probably one of the more widely, more aggressively researched medications of its time, partly because of its controversy that goes behind it and the stigma that goes behind it. I don't have time now to go into the chemistry of it all, but as you've heard, not only here, but also with the other speakers as well, this is a chronic relapsing condition. I don't see Narcan for cocaine. I don't see Narcan for alcohol. And my belief is that there's a reason for that. You know, it was mentioned earlier about opiate addicts, you know, who are continually looking to get high and will use Narcan as an opportunity to go back out again. No doubt. That's the addict. That's the addict in the addict. And it will always be there. So for those opiate addicts who have abused opiates for a significant length of time, and you'll see this, and the research is there, you know, the body changes. You know, early on when I first started this work, back in my early 20s, you know, fresh out of school, you know, green behind the ears, all of it. You know, I didn't know much about it. But over the years, and as I've talked with patients and as I've talked with providers and as I've read the research, there is a definite tipping point for some opiate addicts, that the body's endorphins and receptor sites and what have you changes. And that methadone, Suboxone, Vivitrol, all that simply does is it gets into those receptor sites and it blocks the withdrawal. You'll hear it from opiate addicts all the time. You know, that some are looking to get high, no doubt. You know, most are just wanting to stop being sick. You hear it all the time. The most common statement that we hear when patients are going through their biopsychosocial assessment through the intake process is, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I'm sure all of you have heard that statement before. And in talking with some folks earlier, and I've said this to patients, you know, recently and over my career, you know, my whole thing with, you know, methadone treatment, Vivitrol, Suboxone, any kind of medication-assisted treatment is, you know, when you look at the whole pie, for me, methadone is 2% of the whole pie. It's not a cure. It doesn't get them, you know, to get better up here or get better in here. It doesn't restore relationships. It doesn't, you know, do any of that. All it does is it simply blocks the withdrawal. It allows that person the opportunity to start their recovery. And recovery comes through therapy, which we provide on a weekly basis. And if need be, we provide it on a more aggressive basis because what we're dealing with is, again, we're dealing with addicts who, once they've resolved their opiate addiction, what do they then do? They turn to benzodiazepines, they turn to Seroquel, they turn to clonidine. Most of them, I'm sure the law enforcement officials will attest to this. Many individuals that are out there are abusing benzodiazepines and other CNS depressants because that's another means of being able to get high, so to speak. So, you know, but, you know, in the years that I've been in this business, you know, and watching people grow, you heard it earlier about how people change. I know I could get on my soapbox, I'm sorry. You know, people change, and, you know, the treatment that we provide changes lives. The treatment that gets provided in this room, you know, to individuals, you know, changes lives. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here and, you know, continue to save lives. Thanks.
So, hey everybody, I'm Kelly Holland. I'm a medical doctor at Lynn Community Health Center. I'm grateful that Lynn Community folks are here, director of our complex addiction team, our outreach folks, our senior leadership, great place, great member of the community. I also am a teacher at Tufts Medical School. So with that in mind, I'm gonna give you all homework as you go from here, and I'm not joking. So because I'm a medical type person, I'm just gonna give you a very simple, basic medical type explanation in that it's been very appropriately discussed as substance use disorders as a disease. And what that means is kind of what I'm gonna explain from the medical point of view, because what we see in the media and in movies is not an accurate description of a disease, okay? So number one, for this disease, half of the risk of a substance use disorder is genetic, okay? So a lot of us talk about in our, with our patients with these disorders, you're making bad choices, right? These are personal bad choices. Well, we don't choose our parents. My son has said multiple times that he would like to choose, he'd like Thomas the Train to be his father. So he would like to choose his parent, but we cannot choose our parents. So half of the risk is genetic. So when you're thinking about the choices people have made, they did not choose their parents. Another medical research part of this is that these substances, as you had mentioned, change the brain, okay? If you look under a microscope at the brain of somebody who has used these substances and who hasn't, there's a difference. And the parts of our brain that say, Kelly, make good choices, those parts of the brain are inhibited by these drugs, okay? So the things that are telling you to make smart decisions, do things that are good for your health, they're not working. So we're already giving you this, this disease, and then the parts of your brain that help you recover from disease, we're taking that away too. That's not fair, but that's the medical research reality. The other part is many of you have probably seen patients with a substance use disorder who are in their 30s and acting like teenagers. You're saying, why am I dealing with a petulant teenager who's trying to use the cell phone or borrow the car? Well, a substance use disorder can oftentimes, when started early, because unfortunately many people do get involved in this early, it freezes your development. So in many ways, you are dealing with a teenager. Someone who starts and develops a substance use disorder at age 14 never has the chance to make all those great connections that say, hey, I shouldn't do that anymore, or this is not the way to act. So imagine, again, I've given you risk of this disease by your parents. I've taken away your normal parts of your brain that help with good decisions, and I've frozen you as a 14-year-old. Okay, that's the reason why we have courts that are different for juveniles and for adults, because the juvenile brain is not developed to make good decisions. And yet, when you're an adult, you're 30 years old, the development level can be at age 14. So someone who has this disorder has all these strikes against them, okay, from the medical science point of view under the microscope. And then we add on the stigma. So substance use disorders are the #1 stigmatized condition based on the World Health Organization, more than Ebola, more than HIV. So I've given you all of these things, and then now I forbid you from talking to anybody about it. You can't get a job if you have this. And so my homework assignment #1 is to think about when you see somebody with this addiction. Everybody has responsibility for their actions, no doubt. But what helps a person make the good choices, a lot of that was taken away. So when you see someone who's making really painful choices that destroy their families, their careers, their communities, everything, this person, from a disease point of view, from a science geek like me, we have taken away their ability to make a good choice. And they did not ask for this. There still is responsibility. There is still hope. We can help restore that. So that's homework assignment #1. When you see that person suffering with this disease, you say, wow, that's what they're having to deal with. Okay, homework assignment #2, when you see somebody who's on methadone and Suboxone, to say to them, or say in your head, wow, this person's getting treatment. Awesome, good for you. Okay, this person has sought out a program that is giving them a treatment to help with this horrible disease. They have made a choice to get treatment. Sometimes we see methadone on the medication list and say, oh my God, this person is an addict. Well, homework assignment #2 is to try to get yourself to say, oh my gosh, this person is getting treatment. Awesome, good for you. All right, homework assignment #3 is to think about a disease like diabetes. Diabetics, if they get hospitalized twice for their diabetes, we don't yell at them, we don't give them a hard time. If one of my diabetics came in a diabetic coma, and I said, sorry, 6 months till you get on the waiting list. No, we have no insulin for you, 6 months to get insulin. It wouldn't fly. It would not fly. Okay, so now there are more people dying of this than car accidents. All right, if we had, we have state yearly inspections for cars, we have seatbelts for cars, we have airbags, all these development, all this money pouring into cars, but this is killing more people. All right, so those are the start of your homework assignments. I'm probably going to give you some more when I think about it. So whatever questions you ask me, realize you will get another homework assignment. Oh yes, I remember the last and final one. In October of this year, the Long Island Bridge closed in Boston. We lost 150 treatment beds. Okay, so everyone's talking about more beds, more beds. We lost 150 beds that have not yet been replaced. All right, how many people here are registered to vote? Okay, my representative is sick of hearing from me. When my phone number comes up on caller ID, they say, oh, tell Holland I'm in a meeting. There's no way my representative has that many meetings, all right? I'm sure my email address goes right to spam, okay? But if he hears from you, he's going to listen. If she hears from you, she's going to listen. I have to call from my wife's phone because they won't block the number. All right? You want the beds, you demand it. You say, you want my vote, you give me those beds. All right? That's assignment number 4. You want the vote, give me those beds. No one's going to listen to me anymore. They're done with me. They're like, who's this long-haired idiot? We're not going to listen to him anymore. Do it yourselves. You guys have a union that has power. All right? You have power that our patients need.
Next up, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. They're going to stick around in the back of the room. If you have any questions, Project Hope, Eliot Community, Healthy Streets, and Lynn Community Health Center, and Jayne from Department of Public Health, BSAS. Thank you very, very much. Well, she's offering to speak less than she's allotted. That's great. Thank you. So this is on Dezra Kenney. Captain O'Toole from Lynn Police mentioned his name or her name many times in our meetings. Preparing for the summit, she does Vivitrol treatment only. It's the newest thing we're hearing about here in our profession. Dezra, thank you.
The first thing I'd like to do, don't go anywhere, Don. You did such an awesome job putting this together that we wanted to give you a little gift.
You know my bosses are here, right? I'm only kidding. Thank you.
It's just a little meal at the porthole, and you can have my office manager, Rebecca, be your waitress on Thursday nights only.
Thank you very much.
All right, our pleasure. So when I hear people say the newest compound on the market, it makes me sad because Vivitrol has been out since 2006. And it isn't, can you hear me? All right. And so the reason why our practice has chosen to just focus on Vivitrol is because it is a non-addicting compound. And because of the time, I'm really not going to go through the entire slide deck because it's an hour presentation that I was going to try to do in 10 minutes. So a couple of things that I would like to do is introduce some of the clients that have actually come to Kenney and Associates for treatment. There were more, but when they saw all those probation officers, they left. But if I could have Jarrett and David, Lauren, and I think Zach may still be here. I think they're a wealth of information. Okay? Oh, great. I think, David, you knew a lot of the probation officers here. But for some of them to share their own experience, strength, and hope is much better, I think, than shown in the slide deck. Because when I first met David, he came to the practice, he wanted help with his heroin addiction. And when we tried to talk about Vivitrol being just one little tool in the toolbox, that what we try to offer at Kenney and Associates is that you deal with all different aspects. We have individual counseling and group counseling. We do talk about med management and just put all of that, plus the 12 steps to just have an aftercare program because David's a perfect example of every time he would come to get his injection every month, and I would say, what are you doing for counseling? What are you doing for support? What are you going to do when you get off the shot? He would go, la, 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 la. Just give me the shot, and I don't want to hear anything else. So can you just take 2 minutes, because we are running late, and just give a little synopsis of what your experience was like?
I'm David. I used to go to Des about 2 years ago, like she said. didn't do anything else besides the shot. I actually lost my mass health, so the shot cost about $2,000 without insurance. 1,500, sorry. So once I lost that, within a week I had a needle back in my arm. I had no support, no network. I didn't go to meetings, no nothing. I went on a run with my girlfriend, my mother, and my son. We had a baby, had the best time of my life those 2 years. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter once I get that thought in my head. I'm putting a needle in my arm. You can beat me, arrest me, lock me up. It doesn't matter. Went on an awful run. Went around fentanyl. Overdosed 4 times. Got a 9-inch abscess in my arm. Was in the hospital for 2 months. While lying to my family, everyone, because they didn't know. My poor son was put through hell. Finally came clean, went to detox, went right back to Des crying and gave her the biggest hug of my life. And now I'm going on 5 months clean. I go to therapy, thank you. But yeah, no, there's also NA in here, Bobby, Anthony in the back. If I ever lost my insurance, I know that I have NA, I have counseling, I have people I can actually call this time. That's the big difference. It's not just, like she said, it's not just about the shot. It's not just about the methadone clinic. It's more than that. You actually gotta want it. That's the number one thing. And that's it, thank you.
Jared was invited because he has a 1.5 years of clean and sober time from a pretty horrific opiate addiction. And do you want to just talk about what you do besides the shot that helps you to stay clean and sober?
My name is Jared. I'm an addict. Hi, Des. It's my savior right here. I can pretty much say we all wouldn't be here without Des. She's helped us more than we could ask. Yeah, pretty much I changed my whole life. My friends. I probably only have about 5 friends that I hang out with now. I just changed everything in my life after about 6 or 7 relapses, finally going to Des. Did everything she said, meetings, therapy, just changed my whole lifestyle, and it's made the biggest difference in the world because now, 1 year and 7 months, clean and sober.
I know when Lauren came, she saw someone here that has just given her custody of her daughter back, her son back. And those are the things, similar to what Judge Lamothe said, that we have a bulletin board in the office and we call it the Wall of Fame. When anyone gets a year clean, 2 years clean, we take their picture and honor that work. And as long as the clients know that drug replacement therapy is not the answer, that we want to incorporate, the frontal lobe, executive functioning, making those decisions. So that's why we want individual counseling. And no one, is born and says, I can't wait to stick a spike in my arm and ruin my life and torture my family. So we want to deal with the freight train that's really pushing that addiction. So, there's 4 little miracles right here, and I'm very proud of them. They took the suggestion, and for David, who we, for a while, wondered if he was alive. In the 37 years that I've been in practice, because I too started at age 2, was horrified this year that we've had 60 deaths. So, for my whole career, it used to be that motor vehicle accidents were the #1 killer of the patients in their 20s, and now to see that it's opiate addiction is just unbelievable. We have people doing the groups. Billy, do you mind standing up? Bill Allen is the lead counselor, and he runs 3 of the support groups. And we always tell the staff that he's a BC graduate, not Boston College, Beachmont Connor in Revere, and that his degree is from the School of Hard Knocks. He just celebrated 25 years of being clean and sober himself. So he had 25 years of using, and now he has 25 years of being clean. And I remember the day that he came into Narcotics Anonymous, and to see you as the man you are today. When he came in, you had hair then. long hair and a bushy beard, and you don't mind me saying, you got addicted to heroin in Vietnam. And he said the first time he tried heroin, and his colleagues had said, "Welcome to Nam," and they gave him heroin, and he went out right away, overdosed. And I remember him saying he didn't care that he almost died. He cared that he missed the high. And that was pretty significant. But Billy's someone I can truly say walks the walk and talks the talk. And that was why he was one of the first people that I wanted to get involved in a Vivitrol-based program. And then Joe Lemieux, if you don't mind stand up, he's our clinical director. And I met Joe when he was a student at BU Medical, and I knew he was special then. He always sees the glass half full. And in the 9 years that I've worked with Vivitrol, I've never had anyone say this was a bad decision. And I've never had anyone say that Joe wasn't helpful as a therapist with one-to-one counseling, or as a group leader, same as Billy. We share the same philosophy and mission. What, cut it out? Okay. Zach or Lauren, do you have anything that you want to add? All right. I'm all done. Rebecca is our office manager, and in any private practice, I think your practice is only as good as the office manager, and she's awesome. The receptionist, who I call Mummy most of the time. And then we have Katie, who is in LMHC and just passed her NP exam yesterday. So she'll be joining us too. And I'll just leave this up. What is Vivitrol and what it is not? It is a monthly injection. I give my own injections, but the big thing is we complement it with so many other aspects, as we've talked about. Individual, group. I'm so happy that there's so many probation officers here, because lately I've had, in the past week, 10 patients come in saying, my probation officer wants me here. The judge asked me to be here. The other thing I want to say is nobody ever waits more than 4 days to get an appointment with us. We always have. Yesterday we had a walk-in, and I was happy that we could address that, because addiction is such that why I really love Vivitrol is because in the years that I've worked primarily in addiction medicine, people could get 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months, 9 months in just one bad decision. And that impulsivity, because addiction's all about compulsion and obsession, that they're gone. And for a month, you have that decision taken away, and it blocks the mu receptors, And so the craving is decreased too. And when you get off it, there's no withdrawal. So I hope people will consider that option too. We've talked a lot about methadone and Suboxone, but this is, pardon his language, my mother told him not to use any F-bombs. So, but thank you very much for having us. Thanks.
Thank you.
I should have gave you the watch, not the, I should have said yes. We just have one more speaker. I know we're a couple of minutes late. We do want to hear from Jack Riley from Learn to Cope, the parent support group. So Jack, if you want to come up and close it out, and if anyone stays around after Jack is done, we're going to give out a couple prizes, T-shirts and things like that. Thank you, Jack.
Good afternoon. Always a pleasure to be the last speaker. And always a pleasure to have 10 or 15 minutes of telling my story. I'm an Irish Catholic lawyer. I can't even say hello in 15 minutes. So this will be somewhat of a challenge. First, I never thought I'd be here. I never thought this would be my life. And it's an emotional story for me, even at this point. I speak a lot around Massachusetts and have done a variety of TV and radio things, and it's still emotional for me. I grew up in a house full of alcoholics. When the doctor was talking about genetics, every male in my family for over 200 years has been an alcoholic except me. And so I wanted to purge that from my children. I have two girls, 21 and 24. I became a lawyer. I moved to the W's, Wayland, Weston, Wellesley. I was going to immunize them from this illness. All of our friends were married for a long time. Kids were good kids they played with, after school sports, vacations, good childhood. I thought I had purged everything that had happened over 200 years, and I did not. We thought my daughter had neurological issues. We talked about, we heard dual diagnosis. We walked on eggshells from the time she was 7 because we thought she had neurological issues. She had an admission at McLean's. Everyone told us she was either bipolar or had a personality disorder. We spent thousands trying to find her the right treatment. And then one day, we went to see her at work. And she was squirrely. She had spent the weekend with us. We had a fabulous weekend. She told us how good she was doing, how everything was great. We knew she smoked a little pot, but we didn't know anything else. And I happened to see the person she was supposedly spending the day with. And the woman said to me, "No, we weren't on the Cape this weekend." And I went, "Well, Beck said she was with you for 2 days." "Nope, wasn't there." Then we see Beck squirrely. We knew we had a problem, but we didn't know what kind of problem. We bought a drug test. She came home. We called her home. She came home, sat in our driveway, and had her therapist call us and tell her she was going to kill herself in my driveway. We brought her in the house. She denied taking any drugs, but refused to take the drug test. I knew enough to know that's a false, that's a negative, right? Or that's a positive, all right? I knew that she would have failed the drug test. She refused to fail the drug test or to take it. We gave her a choice that night, my wife and myself. We told her she could live outside of our home or she could go to detox. The choice was hers. No parent should make that choice. There's no training for this. There's no background. There's no way to know what to do. How did I know and how did my wife know to do that? Because I shut off the life support from my brother, who was a drug addict and an alcoholic 15 years before. So I knew that enabling would not work. Do parents have to go through that to make such a hard choice? I was lucky in a way. My brother ended up giving me a blessing because I was prepared now to make a hard choice. But I loved my daughter enough to risk her living under a bridge and doing heroin. No parent should make that choice. We're not capable of making that choice. I thought I was the only one in this game. I figured, nobody else in my town could have this happen to them. I had to be alone. It's a disease of shame and silence, and it kills people because of it. I went to my first Learn to Cope meeting. There were 40 families there. They all had the same story. Some had gone through multiple detoxes, some had overdosed, some were in jail, some were running on the street, and they didn't know where they were. But my story was not the worst story in that room. And so I got hope through Learn to Cope. I got sympathy, I got support, I got resources, I got people saying, it's okay, there is hope. But as a parent, I can tell you this is a disease that affects the whole family. A lot of people have come and spoken about statistics and about different things and about treatment options and everything. Think of it this way. For every heroin addict, there's a whole family that's destroyed. There's siblings. Oh my God, do the siblings suffer through this? Because what you do is you spend all your time and energy trying to save the heroin addict. And the siblings get ignored. And parents split up because they have one enables and one doesn't, right? And when we talk about loving our children, we love our children, but if you have a heroin addict in your family, your love can kill them. There has to be consequences. But you learn that. You don't know it. Nobody's got it in a manual for you. So at the end of the day, we put Becca in detox. She made that choice. She spent hours yelling at me, blaming me for it. She told me she'd have to live with this all her life and how unfair it was that I didn't love her enough to let her stay at home. And I sat through that. And she went to treatment and she lied to us and manipulated us through treatment, but she stayed. We sold her car the day we found out. She went to treatment. She went to a halfway house. She went to a wonderful sober house in Dorchester. And she is 2 years clean. She has a job. She gets up at work at 6 o'clock in the morning and works all day. Never possible. She slept all day when she was in our house. We thought it was being a typical teenager. It wasn't. She goes to meetings. She now has a car. She has a life. And I have the daughter I never thought I'd have. So, when you see somebody who's an addict in front of you and suffers from the disease of addiction, there are people behind the scenes whose lives are destroyed. There are people who are affected by this that you don't see in that room. And it's hard for parents to realize, but I'll tell you this. When you deal with a child who's an addict, what happens is the addiction is in front of you. And behind the addiction is your child. And so when you're dealing with something, you think you're dealing with your child, you're not. You're dealing with the addiction. And the addiction is manipulative. The addiction will steal from you. We have people who come to our meetings who have spent their whole 401k trying to save their child. We have people every week who come into the meetings I facilitate and tell me about overdoses and about deaths. And we live with that and try to help each other. On December 23rd, I'm from the Cape, and December 23rd in Yarmouth, we had a person come into one of our meetings and her son had overdosed. At 7 o'clock was in the ER. The nurse who started her shift at 4 o'clock said to her, "This is my 6th overdose this shift." 6 overdoses, 1 nurse, 1 ER. I heard a presentation in Washington and they gave us a statistic and said, imagine 2 jumbo jets full of people. That's how many people die of overdoses every day in this country. If 2 jumbo jets fell out of the sky, do you think we'd solve the problem in a week? Yeah, we'd solve the problem in a week, all right. But we don't solve this problem. It's a complicated problem. It needs education, support, beds. It needs people like you in this room to care. But please don't forget that their lives are just as valuable. They are somebody's son or daughter or husband or wife. And when a hospital discharges somebody after 5-6 hours and they've come back from a Narcan overdose and they send them out in the street again, do we really value their life? Would they really do that if it was another disease? It is the most stigmatized disease in the world, but it is not their choice. They don't just get over it. Parents aren't responsible for this, okay? This is not being a bad parent. This is no, I heard a doctor once at a workshop I was at say to my daughter, is it because you didn't have enough afternoon activities? Okay, this was a doctor. So the problem is widespread. It deals with a variety of things, the overprescription of medication. My daughter has said she forum shopped with doctors. She got everything she wanted, nobody ever refused her, and she went from Percocets to heroin because the Percocets were so expensive. So at the end of the day, I have a bunch of things I could tell you, but I'm really here today, I think, to be the face of this. And I don't want to be the face of this. I don't want to talk around Massachusetts and do interviews. But you know what? People don't speak up. If you think you don't have it in your town or you don't know anybody who has this issue, believe me, you do. They're just not talking about it. They're behind closed doors suffering. So Learn to Cope offers family support. We have a forum, a website. There's 6,000 people from all over the world on the website. So it gives you the opportunity to go on and get advice. I recommend that if you can tell parents about that, it's a good thing. We're one of the few Narcan distributors from DPH. Now it's going out to the EMTs and first responders and to police, and we're so glad for that. But please don't anecdotally think that people are using heroin because there's Narcan, all right? Narcan saves people's lives. Narcan saves a son or a daughter. If somebody tells you they're using heroin because there's Narcan, then frankly, that's not true. That's anecdotal, all right? People use heroin because they have an addiction, not because there's a remedy that can bring them back, all right? So I just wanted to get a couple of minutes of your time. There's a billion things I'd love to tell you. At the end of the day, let me just say this. Please have compassion. Because this isn't easy. And those kids don't choose it. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad you attended. Our regional supervisor, and I close it out. Thank you for coming.
Excuse me, I think this was a very worthwhile conference. If you agree, give me a hand. Hopefully this will be a yearly thing that we'll be able to do in Region 3. But one thing I wanted to say is Kathy Anderson here? Is she still here? Is Kathy here? Well, Kathy's from North Shore Community College, and she worked hand in hand with Don to put this together, and I think she did a great job. So I want to give her a hand, although she's not here. And again, I want to thank everybody for coming and thank you for all your collaboration, your work you do in the field. Thank you.